let's begin, if we can, Fred, with you and I talked about some comparisons between former players and the players that are involved in the NFL Combine right now. And you gave me some great insight as to some of those guys. And I want to say that with a caveat of comparing current players and former greats is always sketchy. You put pressure on the new players, and you can kind of ask yourself, is it unfair? But in doing so, I'm curious, when you see Hendon Hooker, let's kind of start with him, and then we can kind of go through them. When you see Hendon Hooker, I see a guy with a great deep ball mobility. I see a T. Martin type of guy. Also, I think great leadership ability. How apt is that comparison?
It's a great comparison there. Because for one, did anyone expect T to win a national championship and be as good as he was? When Hendon Hooker came to UT, did anyone expect for him to even start?
Yeah.
Right. Joe Milton was a starter, right? And he came in and he put up numbers upon numbers. And he basically created his own story, kind of like T. The one thing that T didn't have the ability, the one thing T didn't have the opportunity for was for them to open up the offense from the beginning of the year.
True.
Now, that was different. That was just a different mindset in coaching, more so than anything. But I look at those two and I say, very similar. And Hendon Hooker has a chance to go and be a good football player at the next level. And also, I think he'll play a lot on Sundays. I think this kid's going to be one of those that gets that opportunity to show that he can throw that deep ball, anywhere, against anyone, and against the top level of talent.
Fred, before I jump in, because I want to go to another one, I just want to say I was part of the audience. I did not know about this segment you guys were doing either. A little disappointed. I thought you guys were going to tell me y'all were going to be DJing the Taylor Swift dance night parties that they're having in every city. And
we're doing that too. We're gonna call Sterling Hinton, and we're gonna have some fresh mixes, as the kids say.
Because the Taylor dance night is in Atlanta Sunday, and I thought you were going to be there, Fred. And
if Taylor Swift invites me herself, I'll be there.
Nice. Fred was on with me one time when we had Ronaldo Woolridge, Swiper Boy. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
But I asked him, I said, do you plan all this out or do you just freelance? And everybody looked at me like an idiot. And it's not freelance, it's freestyle. Freelance is what you do when you write for somebody else in the journalism world. And I look like the biggest square in the history of man. I might as well that rap is sure swell.
Swiper Boy did not have great bars. I'm sorry. I got to go there.
Hey, that's hipper. What you just said is hipper than anything I could come up with.
He did not have great bars. No. But hey, he was a producer. That's where you make the money at.
That is true. That was during the era of Hurricane Chris, Soulja Boy, all those producers coming out. And moving on to I wanted to talk a little bit about because I know you thought we were insane last week when we were a little bit down on Jalin Hyatt, but we're even less fans this week, Fred, because of his 40 time. But who are some people you find Jalin Hyatt to be similar to that are former Vols?
My comparison, I look at him, I see Peerless Price. Because of the deep ball aspect, I think Peerless may have ran better routes, intermediate routes, but the deep ball aspect, he's that one guy that can get open down the football field and he's going to catch that deep ball. And Peerless can get open on anybody. And I look at Jalin Hyatt and say he can do the same. I see the 4.4 140, and I really associate that with at least a 4.3 because I watched his technique. I felt like his body moved before he moved his hand, was starting the clock anyway. And so his explosion wasn't full. I see him as running as probably a 4.37. And when he comes to, if he runs at the Tennessee Pro Day, he'll probably run a 4.37. But that speed he has is different. It's not a lot of guys out here that can do what he did and do what Peerless did. And Peerless had a really long career in the NFL. I see Jalin Hyatt being able to do the same. Just because of the way he's used at UT, he has all the athletic ability that all the rest of these guys have. He was the top. But when you come and look at overall, he was the top receiver out of that group for his testing goes. With the standing long jump, the 40, the vertical, and those type of things. That's what reminds me of what Peerless did. Peerless had that same explosion, and he can get open on you anyway. And that speed down the football field to be able to catch that deep ball, that's who Jalin Hyatt reminds me of if I had to go with any guy that played at UT in the last 20 years.
Okay,
20-something years.
I want to get to the other guys, but you said something that's really interesting because your only job when the offseason begins and the end of the season is to learn how to do these drills. And the biggest one's the 40-yard dash, okay? And Jalin Hyatt said, not before the 2022 season, but for the 2021 season, his headspace wasn't in the right place. He said that publicly, and he rededicated himself and committed himself to football. So when you say something like that he made a mistake in his 40 time, and he gets to run it more than once, he pulled himself out with a hamstring issue. If I'm an NFL GM, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm worried that he may be in that bad headspace again because he's had the offseason to work on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but anytime you running, you're not going to get every technique correct.
Okay.
I mean, you can watch the fastest guy that ever ran, Usain Bolt. He made mistakes on his starts a few times. He just had enough speed to finish it out. That's just happens. Regardless of how much you run, you're never going to run a perfect race every time. And you can run your perfect technique and still run a slower time than what you ran before. It just works that way. I don't think he's in a bad headspace. I think it's more so he did a really good job at everything else. And a 4.41 is nothing to like wink your eye at. That's fast.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I know we're seeing defensive ends run 4.39 and everything, but that's still speed. If I'm going to put him up against Nolan Smith from Georgia, I'm still going to put my money on Jalin Hyatt to win that race.
No, I agree with that.
Fred, obviously I defer to football players when they're on the show about football stuff because I don't know. You've forgotten more football than I've ever learned in my life, than I'll ever learn in my life. But I had a hard time with the Peerless Price comparison only because I have such a soft spot in my heart for Peerless Price because that was the first year I was watching Tennessee, and it seemed like every single time y'all needed a score, Peerless Price was the one to make the play. And he was a 5'11" receiver playing like a 6'4" wideout at the time. And I'm just, I look back and I'm like, it was just, he's my favorite receiver ever to play at Tennessee. And I know Tennessee's wide receiver, but I just, sorry, I just had to bring that up.
I understand it. And I feel when I had the conversation with a few other people, and that was my comparison. And that's what I see. I mean, practicing against Peerless every day and everything. And here's the other thing. Carl Pickens is my favorite receiver to ever play at UT. Wow. Will always be. He's one of the best athletes that ever played a game at UT, period. I don't care what position it is. And I look at him and I still see that Jalin Hyatt had 5 touchdowns against Alabama. And Alabama wasn't a non-ranked team. They were ranked in the top 10. And he had 5 touchdowns against Alabama. 6 catches, 5 touchdowns. Hey, man, that puts you up there anyway. You got 2 safeties that are sitting back there that you're going up there against. One's going to be a first-round draft pick, and the other one's going to be a second or third-round draft pick. So you can't knock what he did. I mean, I know the game has changed, and the era is different. And Peerless Price did play on a national championship football team and was MVP, offensive MVP of that game. Yes. But what I see from those two, that's my biggest comparison. I can see that. I can see the speed difference, how they separate from receivers. Peerless was really great at that. We've had a lot of really good receivers come through here. We've had none score 5 touchdowns on an Alabama football team, and they only had 6 catches. We only had 1 win the Blitnikoff Award.
Yeah.
So I got to give him that respect.
Yeah.
Peerless is at the top of the chain now. So I'm giving Hyatt a lot of love with that. But Peerless is right there at the top of the chain. But I see Hyatt as being Peyton Manning is always going to be the best quarterback to ever play at UT, right? Somebody can come and throw more touchdowns than him, even throw for more yards. But he's still going to be the best quarterback to ever play at UT.
Yeah.
I look at Jalin and I say he could be one of the best receivers to ever play. He won an award that said he was at least the best receiver in the country.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah, that Biletnikoff award is a pretty special one. So, some other guys, and you gave me a great comparison with Darnell Wright and Chad Clifton, because I went back and looked it up. Chad Clifton did play both tackle positions as Darnell Wright did. Chad Clifton would have been a Hall of Famer if not for Warren Sapp taking that cheap shot and breaking his pelvis. I thought that was a fantastic comparison, Fred, and one that fit perfectly. I also wanted to go the Byron Young direction, because you were very hesitant to offer this one, because he is a special player that we're getting ready to talk about. But I did research actually this morning, and there's some similarities in the athletic ability. I'm not getting ready to call Byron Young this guy, and neither is Fred. Okay. But there are some similarities with a guy named Leonard Little.
Yeah.
As far as the ability, the size, especially people may not realize, but when Leonard Little went through the combine, he was a lot lighter. He's about 20 pounds lighter than he played. And he also was that type of guy who never lost any speed with leverage around an offensive lineman. He never lost any speed. It was like he's running a straight line, but he's running the curl. So I know we're stepping on sacred ground here, Fred.
That's even more sacred ground. It's even more sacred ground than Peerless.
I know, but you said it. And when I looked at and we're talking about two guys that are very raw. So we're not saying he's going to be Leonard Little, but there are comparisons.
Comparisons in body type, comparisons in speed, athletic ability. Let me just say it this way. All right. They do have very similar traits. It's hard for me to say athletic ability. I can't say that. I'm sorry. And I don't care who's watching. I don't care whoever sees this. Leonard Little is probably the hands down the best player I've ever played with on the defensive side of the football. And one of the best athletes ever to play the game, period. Like when I say, we're talking about a 6'3", 240-pound guy who can run a 4.340. And he showed it every week on the game. The only difference I have is that Byron has the talent, and he's very raw. Can we see it on the football field? We can. But I've never seen him do any of the things that Leonard Little did.
Right.
I haven't seen anybody do those type of things in a long time. I mean, we watched Jadeveon Clowney at South Carolina do some of the things that Leonard was doing back in the mid-90s, but not to that level still. You know what I mean? I still look at Leonard Little and say if he didn't play linebacker for first and second down in 1997, you put him on the defensive end, I think we win the championship 2 years in a row, 97 and 98. It's just my opinion. He was that much of a difference maker. And if you ask any player that played on our football team, if Leonard Little was a difference maker, I guarantee if you put him at defensive end, there is no way we don't win that championship. Period.
Love it. That is great stuff. Go for it, Caleb. You're in. I gotta take a breather.
No, I never even thought. Yeah, I forgot about him playing middle linebacker during the part.
It's because it was absolutely stupid.
Man, could you imagine if you could have Al Wilson at middle linebacker and Leonard Little at defensive end?
Yeah,
all together the whole year.
And I will say, and Fred's got his arms in the air. I will say this: the media did get it right that year. We said it from the get. We said no, do not play him at Mike. And I think John Chavis, to a large extent, just wanted to do that to prove that he could.
I think so too, but dude, man, well, you just don't know. You have no idea. If Leonard Little is playing, man, listen, if you can go back and watch all of those games, just on third down, just watch him. Don't watch nobody else.
Oh, yeah.
On third down, just watch Leonard.
Yeah, he's one of those players that you watch the game and you watch him. at the same time. I
At
used
the
to say
same
that about
time.
NASCAR with Dale Earnhardt Sr. and the race. You would always
Man,
want Senior as well.
Being in the secondary, you knew one thing. It's third and whatever. Hey, man, we got little coming and going against. I don't care who your offensive guard, your offensive tackle is over there. You better put 2 people over there because he's going to get you a quarterback. And we know it. And the ball is coming out fast. And we're going to be coming. We knew it. Just if he had just played, if we had that guy playing defensive end on first down, second down, and third down, it changes the game that much. He's like a generational player, like one that you won't see for a long time. So that's why it's hard for me to say Byron Young and then put Leonard Little in the same. And he was also the meanest football player I ever played with.
Yeah, meaner than Al?
He would, hands down. Al is like if we're going on a scale of 1 to 10, football player mean, Al is like a 10 and Leonard's like a 15.
Wow. Ouch. Kayla, I want you to jump in there. Portions of the program brought to you by Zool Beer Company, xulbeer.com. Parking downtown, you just don't have that in Knoxville. And worldwide award-winning craft beer, zoolbeer.com. You're going to love it. Great merch as well. Zool Beer, xulbeer.com. Kayla?
Fred, staying on the players of the Combine, the other receiver that I think is a better pro prospect than Jalin Hyatt, I think he's a potential first rounder. I mean, not a first rounder. I think he has first round talent. Excuse me. Is Cedric Tillman. Who do you see Cedric Tillman being similar to?
You know, and I said this before. Body wise, I'm looking at a Kelley Washington body wise, but the route running ability of Cedric Wilson. Those are the 2 people I would look and say, okay, he's a combination of the 2. I don't know if we've ever had one that's just a one like him. You know what I mean? I can go with kid was from Virginia. Got hurt against Florida. I can't remember his name right now. But out of UT guys, I would put a blend of 2 guys together to say that's him. Cedric Wilson ran some of the best routes you can find. And this kid runs some really good routes, strong, and can finish. And I think that was Kelley Washington also. So he can put up a lot of big numbers and those type of things. And I look at Cedric Tillman and I see an NFL guy who can play for a long time and can potentially be a star. Now, the difference between the 2 that I see, I don't know if Jalen's ever going to be a number 1 receiver. I don't know if that's the case. I think he's better when he has another guy on the opposite side of him that can go as well. And I'm saying that not as a knock. I'm saying when you get to the NFL, it's 1 or 2 things you got to have really great at. You be good at catching that deep ball or be good at route running, right? You can eventually develop into that other part of it as well. But I think when you have both of those things already when you're coming out, I think Cedric Tillman brings those both to the table. But that doesn't make one more valuable or less valuable than the other because every team has to have that same thing. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs when they had Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill doesn't run all the greatest routes, but he has so much speed he can open up a defense at any point, and they can open up things for other guys underneath. I think that's what Jalin Hyatt has. You got to have one that can take the top off the defense. He can do that. And you got to have another who can run all the intermediate routes and be very good at doing those things. I think that's what Tillman is good at. I wish we got a chance to see both of those guys healthy for an entire season. I really think we would have been bowling in the national championships if we had both of those guys healthy all season. I think they can both get to the next level and do a really good job. But usually the guy who is the number 1 guy on any team most of the time, unless you're Tyreek Hill, is the guy who can run the better routes. But it doesn't take away from being the other guy on the opposite side of the football team, on the opposite side of the field.
Hey, I think people get confused sometimes by the definition of a number 1 receiver. To me, from the coaches that I've talked to in the NFL and scouts, a number 1 receiver, correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, you played safety, obviously, is one that dictates coverage, one that you have to be concerned about. And I don't think Jalin Hyatt dictates coverage. Is that a good way to put it?
Yep.
All right, so
I look at Peerless Price, and he was the number 1 receiver for our team in college. When he got to the NFL, and we're talking about these guys moving on. And this is not a dig or a knock. This is just the truth. I think when Peerless Price got to the NFL, he had a guy by the name of Eric Mose who was already a #1 receiver on the opposite side of him.
Oh, that's right.
And that made a big difference in him being able to get open because you're not garnering that double team every play. And that's what, a #1 receiver is going to get. You look at a Julio Jones, and you had Roddy Wright. When he first came to the NFL, Roddy Wright was getting all the double teams. Toward the end of Roddy Wright's career, it was Julio Jones getting all the double teams. And Roddy Wright was the guy who was the one-on-one guy now. So that's what you have in these guys. And I look at him and I say, I think Tillman could be that guy who could end up being in one because he does all those things right. He does all the route running, those types of things. Now, Jalin, I think Jalin is more of the two guy who, if he has another guy on the opposite side, you got to be able to, you don't want to necessarily not cover him one-on-one, double team him, but you got a better chance of double teaming the other guy because he's going to be the guy who can keep the chains moving. That's a high percentage pass as opposed to throwing a deep ball, which is a lower percentage pass.